Hello, we're back with another P Talk, and today we're talking about a really powerful topic, relationships. What a topic. Really, seriously, what a topic. I mean, relationships all around are so complex, have so many layers, but I think when we think about relationships from a personal and professional standpoint, there is a whole other layer of complexity that is often not what people are discussing when we say relationships, right? So I'm really happy and excited that we're focusing on that as a theme. And some of the questions that I have for you today, I'm sure are questions that, are really things that are on the minds of a lot of people and people need more clarity on. And I think a lot of these questions are questions that maybe they don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer, but there are things that definitely could be provided insight for. So without further ado, we have 3 questions for our P-Talk today.
Wow, I'm excited.
Are you ready for them?
I am more than ready. It's about relationship. It's a topic that is so dear to me because we don't live in a desert island. We are surrounded by human beings, animals, and any forms of beings. And relationships is everywhere, just like
Bugs.
the movie, like love is all around, the relationship is all around. So I'm super excited about this topic. It's so key, and after the COVID-19, it's probably even more meaningful to talk about that now.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's just one of these topics where people often think about this and they don't realize we have to put attention and thought into how we're going to handle different kinds of relationships, right? So I'm really excited to talk about this. And I think it's definitely something that all of us, some of these questions are things all of us have had on our minds as compassionate leaders in the workplace, especially if you're leading a team. The first question, I'm just going to go right into it, is building relationships at work can be really difficult. So what are some of your suggestions for building mutually beneficial relationships personally and professionally?
This is a great question. It's a tough one. You're starting with a tough one. I tell you what, I've been thinking about when we actually decided on the topic, the theme. I was like, what can we talk about? And so I said, look, there's so much work I've done around the topic of relationship, accompanying leaders and coaching people one-on-one or teams. And actually, it went super far. In my thought process, I went back to where I was raised and culture I was growing into. And there is such an importance of relationship in every civilizations. I would use the word civilizations because it's what I want to talk about. For those of you who know, it's maybe not obvious from my name, Soko Trin. And say, oh, Dr. Trin, what does that come from? Is that Vietnamese? Trin is a Vietnamese last name. Soko is a Cambodian first name, but actually ethnically, from what I know, I did not do a DNA test, but my family has roots from the Middle Empire. Right? It's called in a lot of books from China. And so, and I was raised in France. And in Chinese communities and Chinese culture, there is a huge importance given to relationship and a concept that has been made worldwide famous, but sadly, to my view, poorly described and defined and translated, is the concept of Guanxi, Guanxi. 人际关系, Guanxi. And Guanxi really is, when you look at Guanxi, what it means is the way I will define it myself is the quality network with mutual benefits that sustain through time. And a quality network with mutual benefits that sustain through time in a given community, a group, a tribe, or a population. And so when you have Guanxi within the Chinese community, you want to find maybe a spouse within that community. If you need money, you would find money from that community. If you need help as a colleague in an office and you're lost because you don't know how to a function that you couldn't find on Excel, you would look at someone from this community and they would actually help you. And when you look at the research on Guanxi, but also my own observation between Guanxi and happiness, Guanxi and success, you understand the importance of building a network of trusted individuals that you can trust, but also who trust you from a given call it the group. In sociology, we call that the in-group, right? You feel part of that, in social identity, as a field, you call that,
Right.
these people are part of I feel part of them, part of that group. Well, we call it an in-group in sociology. And in Guanxi, you've got that sense of, I feel belonging to that community. And therefore, what happens is, to use the word of a famous writer in the field of, leadership development, Patrick Lencioni, then this trust that is being built. Trust at the base of the team, within the couple, within the family, as simple as that, within the village. And I would want to talk about Guanxi because when you start building a quality network, so connecting with individuals that you can trust and that can trust you, that sustain through time, not something that you give up on after 2 months, but something that sustain through the month and the years, where you can bring your authentic self, and where you also know this concept of that I find super pragmatic when you think about it, where there's mutual benefits. So it doesn't mean that you're interested. It just means that you know your worth, you know what you can bring, you know what they potentially could bring, and you mutually help each other. We see that in economy, countries should focus, regionally, with the concept of, comparative advantages. Countries should focus on what they're very strong at. Well, when you extrapolate and think about what some people are strong at, network they have, or skills they have, or knowledge they have, or a resource they have in general, including love that they can give, including time they can give, why not having exchange as well? And provided it can be beneficial to everyone. And I think that right now, after COVID, well, we're still in COVID, to build mutually beneficial, quality, sustainable network is absolutely key. And you look at the research, especially for the well-being of the individual, but as simple as for the individual success as well, because we don't live alone. When we are social animals, we need to connect, we need to survive as a gang, as a group, as a pack, when you think about it. And when you look at the correlations between animal kingdom, anthropological studies, and studied on civilization, you understand that men, as in human beings, men, women, have survived all these years because they have lived as a pack and thanks to relationship. And there's no exception in an organizational setting. There's no exception in families. So I would say that personal or professional...
That's a great point. There's no exception.
There's no. Provided you build a quality network where there's trust, mutual benefits that is perceivable and perceived, that you can bring your authentic self, and where there's an exchange of resources, qualities, time, and so on and so forth, this is something that most likely would allow you to feel good, to be happy, and to succeed.
I'm hearing there are two things that have just been on my mind as you've been talking, and I've been trying to, make sure that I just want to bring them up, because there are two things I really hear and am hearing from this. It's like, if we can create authentic relationships, if we can decide to create an environment as leaders where people can show up authentically, that includes you as a model, then you begin to build quality relationships that are both personal and professional. But also, going back to your whole, how do you pronounce it again? I'd like for you to pronounce it for us.
Guanxi with a G.
Guanxi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for those of you who are listening who are native speakers with my accent, but it just sounds like within that concept as well, sustainability and longevity are focuses. And I find that really interesting because we don't often put a lot of thought into, what really goes into creating sustainable, long-term, mutually beneficial relationships. We think about that in a very romantic sense. I think the world is focused on that. But we're all sometimes so confused about the whole professional side of things. Confused is probably not the right word. It's really more like we just simply don't focus on it as much. So we don't have as much perception and self-awareness around it. So I think to go back to the points that you were saying, like those are the things that I'm really hearing from what you've shared with us today. Those are the things that really stand out to me. And I think it's just like a way of summarizing what you've said. Is there anything that you want to add to that, or?
I would just say it's really spot on, and I really like the fact that you are from this you're putting the finger on a concept that in my own scientific research is very important. Is the concept of authentic identity, and what I mean by this is I looked at people who are passionate leaders, and that ball of fire that they have in their stomach, in their guts, and there is such things as faking passion. So people who
absolutely.
So some leaders that do not want to show their vulnerable self because they feel like, no, I'm a leader, I need to look strong, and therefore what they try to do is they hide their emotions, they hide their vulnerability. When they have a bad day, they don't want to say that, and they typically would look quite transactional. So hard on facts, objective, full stop, almost like a robot when you think about it, right? But then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got those that are passionate appearance that is authentic or passionate appearance. And what my research suggests is there's a mirroring effect between, I'm putting for those who can see on my screen, on one side you've got the leader, and what happens is what the leader is emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally, there is a mirroring effect through a process of not only but of emotional contagion that transfer part of the passion, or maybe the obsessive behaviors toward the other side, the followers, the team members. And when you're actually authentically passionate, meaning for better and for worse, you show when you're happy, you got a smile, or you actually would say it. But also when you share when you're going through a bad day, you're vulnerable. What happens is when you are authentically showing who you are, what you feel, including your own vulnerable self, trust increases. You are actually humanized through the eyes of your team members. It's fascinating.
It absolutely is. For those of you who are listening and who maybe don't know this concept of the mirroring effect, I've seen a couple of articles written about it. Obviously, you've written about it in your research, but it is absolutely fascinating, and especially as it relates to authentic leadership, which is such a big topic that we're always talking about here. Like here at Dr. Passion, it's not just about like leadership coaching, growing within coaching capabilities as a leader, or like thinking about yourself in this personal development way. I think it's very much focused on how can we truly sort of help ourselves think about leadership in a way that is authentic and passionate and true to who we actually are, and create from that space. So certainly look it up if you're listening and you haven't read about it, the mirroring effect. It's very powerful for sure. I just want to move on to the next two questions. I did start off with the hardest question, so I know that really was the hardest of the two questions, but it is multi-layered, so I'm glad that we got into it. Something I wanted to go into this, and like I don't know how much you really have to say about this. I know that it's also a multifaceted sort of question I'm about to bring up, but I do on some level think that there is sort of like different thought leadership around the answer to this question. So you have been warned, for those of you listening, and you as well, Dr. Soko, but what are your tips for sort of navigating boundaries and working relationships as a compassionate leader? And the reason why I ask this, there's a really specific reason why I ask this, is because I think all of us are navigating that. If you're a leader in the workplace, if you're currently in a place of leadership, you have individuals who all have separate and collective relationships in relation to you as a leader in the workplace. And it's impossible for us as human beings to not have personal bonds and personal relationships with people on our teams, colleagues, peers, clients. So how can we manage those boundaries, like continue to be compassionate leaders and come from that place of authentic, compassionate leadership, which is so important and we're always talking about here. But like, how can we actually, sort of navigate that boundary of continuing to act as a compassionate leader, but still have that authority as a leader in our workspaces through time, right? I think especially with time, those lines can get really blurry. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are around that question.
I think it's such a current question, and by current I mean by this, it's a hot topic right now.
Yeah, because we don't have the old corporate world anymore. Like that's dying off. Yeah.
I mean, it is dying, and at the same time, old school leadership, people that go, and some people will hate me for saying that, but we know social reproduction from the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu many years ago, that people who look alike want to club together. You want to, sadly, for better and for worse, you want to have people that think like you. I think of the Facebook friends that you have, and when there's some sort of presidential election and you're surprised by the score, by the result, well, no surprise, because those that actually Facebooking you are people that think like you, vote like you.
Yeah, I
the
was
same way in a
reading.
company, you would have people that go to the same pub, go to the same play for, bet for the same football team, play golf together. We reproduce social boundaries, and the thing that is very hard is when you manage to see through this as a compassionate leader. And my own research actually have that component of compassionate leaders as one type of passionate leaders. So first, I want to get back to what compassionate means, and it just happens to be a very hot topic at the conference where I just presented a couple of days ago, the 10th European Conference in Positive Psychology. There were a few fellow scholars that talked about compassion, but also self-compassion. Yeah. And the bottom line answer to your question resides in one word, and that's linked to also my own research. It's awareness. Awareness with a capital A. And what I mean by this is when you want to put boundaries and navigate through boundaries as navigating through relationship boundaries as a leader that you would self-identify as compassionate, which is a leader that can feel others, that can put him or herself in somebody else's shoes, or regionally compassion, the ability to almost feel the suffering, of another individual, the feeling, the senses of somebody else. Well, guess what? That takes awareness. It's easy to say, but how many leaders have the ability, that scanner, as I call it metaphorically, to scan their own self when they're going from the bright side of their personality to the dark side, when they start shouting at somebody, becoming passive aggressive, becoming eccentric, and how many leaders who can do that can also do that on other people. They enter a room and they can scan, for example, I call that the weather forecast. You enter a room, nobody has spoken, and you feel, ooh, it's freezing cold here. What just happened? Or you talk to a team member and you feel, something is wrong. Tell me, can I help? How can I help you? I'm noticing that, I feel that. And so the level of awareness is probably the biggest response for a leader to navigate boundaries in working relationships, to be able to also put boundaries. Another topic that I get a lot when we've got coaching, executive coaching, is, I used to be the manager, then I became the leader of the team, of the department, and some of my friends became under my management, and that feels weird because I don't know how to set boundaries about that. But how can you be bringing your self-compassion and compassion toward others by setting those boundaries while keeping those relationships? And I think level of awareness, self to yourself, but awareness around you, what I call meta-awareness, so a helicopter view, is a very critical response in the ability of leaders to successfully set boundaries in working relationships, would be my response.
I was reading an article, and this is what I was going to mention earlier, that said why hiring for cultural fit is like one of the worst things, something along the lines, don't quote me, of like one of the worst things you can do for your business. And I found it really interesting because, I've sat through interviews before where this last phase is a cultural fit interview for like really big companies. And I find this really interesting because it's a little counterintuitive. Like you would think that, it would be great for people to hire for cultural fit within a company, but it's not exactly like that, is it? It's not exactly, and it's like you said, it's a very controversial topic of sort of,
Yeah.
Some people, you said it, you prefaced it before, some people are going to hate you for saying this. I think it is a different school of thought. And I just think that it really depends on, it depends on what's going on within the landscape and temperature check, weather forecast of the company too. And I think that's just a big part of it as well. And just to add on to something, one of the things that you said, you were talking a little bit about, what it's like to sort of like exist within this realm of having these really strong boundaries whilst also having by having that self-awareness. And I just want to emphasize that just as two individuals who think and breathe positive psychology, self-awareness is a skill. It can be built. So I think a lot of people assume that they have a lot of self-awareness, and to some extent that is true. Some people do have like a gift, a talent per se of self-awareness. Would you agree? Like some people are naturally more self-aware than others. I think that self-awareness, however, and not just self-awareness, awareness in general, is something that can be built. And I just want to like emphasize for everybody listening that is a true research fact. We can work on our reflective practices. We can devise reflective practices that work better for us as individuals and for what we're trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to add that in because it really was something I was thinking about as we were talking about this, because we're obviously people who understand that within the world of positive psychology, the practice of self-reflection is quite literally a science, right? So
it is, and you look at, and beyond positive psychology, that also borrows from many disciplines. You look at leadership development, leadership studies, and this new field called positive leadership and positive organizational scholarship. The sense of awareness is omnipresent, and in fact, my own research suggests that the impact that you have on followers and employees depend on two big dimensions. Is one thing that we talked about is the way you communicate and manifest your authentic self or fake it. So level authentic passion, appearance. And the other dimension is the level of awareness. So in other words, if you're highly aware and you are showing your true self, authentically your passion, chances are you'll build trust, people will follow you, you will be able to transfer your passion, and you will build engagement. And if you have very low awareness, you don't see when you're becoming crazy, aggressive, when you don't care about human beings, but only focus about, for example, transactions. At the same time, you're faking it. You don't want to show your vulnerable self. People start detaching themselves emotionally, and so they disengage, and that start building disengagement through time, and therefore through it also leads to, according to my data, to this dysfunction in the organizational dysfunction. It's fascinating. We could talk about this for hours, but I guess we don't have that time.
Maybe in the next podcast episode, in the next P-Talk episode. So how can leaders use coaching to strengthen relationships in teams, and what are some of the benefits that reaps? I'm sure you personally have experiences. You've conducted, team coaching sessions to reap the benefits of team coaching within the realm of, authentic leadership and relationships within teams. So very powerful tool when it comes to teams, team coaching. I think a lot of us have had a positive team coaching experience at some point. So tell us a little bit about that. How can leaders really use team coaching to strengthen those relationships in a way that's maybe unique to what they've encountered or experienced before?
Yeah, I really love this question. I'm going to take a step back and talk about the word that you used just a minute ago in your question. It's the word benefits. I think we need to understand why we should even care about team coaching. Why should we even talk about that as opposed to leadership development or team training, for example, and team facilitation? It's a very, very specific concept, right? When you coach a team, a system, we call it systemic coaching as well. The benefits are multiple. I don't have to quote any research for that. You will actually Google and you'll see plenty of research from the likes of McKinsey, the likes of academic scientific papers. Better relationships, positive relationship, which itself leads to top line increase. You would have turnover, so staff rotation decreasing, retention of top talent increases. You have happiness index increasing as well. You would have just an amazing positive work climate that would show up, and a lot of toxic behaviors or toxin would actually disappear through time. and simply the level of awareness at an
It's
individual
like
level.
working on a relationship, literally.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Going
It's like
to
in
a
a couple.
professional to work on the relationship within a team. It's just more than two
Abs-
people usually.
Absolutely. It's a get back to this idea. We don't live in a desert island. We will, no matter where we go in the world, meet people, and that just opening the door to the person that will deliver an Amazon delivery pack is a relationship. Buying your bread, talking to someone is a relationship. Interview is a relationship. It's a
Yeah, and it's
so
beautiful.
one thing.
It's beautiful that team coaching, in a way, normalizes working on professional relationships in this way. Because team coaching
It
has
is
so many
very
outcomes,
powerful.
and like you said, so many results. Proven results, and can be used for so many things. Like not just conflict resolution, but also to just strengthen performance on an already high performing team. I mean, it can be used in such a variety of ways. So I think that that's like really beautiful.
I will quote a very specific example of speaking about conflict resolution. I have to talk about. First of all, I want to salute this my fellow senior coaches and front of room leaders at one of the training program that I took in system relationship coaching many years ago. And one of the things that we discussed was toxin management, TOXIN. So there's a lot of toxic behaviors, and those research come from a gentleman called Gottman, who actually built the Gottman Institute. And Dr. Gottman was a very famous psychologist that has been spending his life on couple resolution, thousands and thousands of couple conflicts. And he boils down his finding to 4 type of toxic behaviors. And think about it as a couple with your husband, your wife, but also with you. So LMX, so the relationship between leaders and employees, same thing. The first toxic behavior would be criticism. When you actually start criticizing, your team members or the colleagues. Anyway, you're just a piece of shit. You don't know what you're doing. I think you're super lazy. And what happened is that become personal. Yeah, it becomes very personal. So one way to tackle this is to have a gentle startup of the conversation. So you want to have some positive statement. In positive psychology, we have positive reframing, and then you use positive communication techniques. What I like about what you said is, and may I also suggest that ... right? Then there's another behavior which is contempt. Yeah, CONTEMPT. And contempt is really this idea of you're attacking with an intent to kind of abuse somebody or to actually insult someone.
Right, contempt.
And so contempt, right? And what you want to do here and respond is, as a leader, as a manager, you want to start building some sort of work environment, a work climate, a culture of appreciation. Right? You want people to look at the bright side. So, for example, there's a very well-known technique called appreciative inquiry. It's an approach in itself. It's a very complex approach that looks.
Inquiry.
It looks at, first you discover the strengths within the team, then you kind of dream about the future of the team, then you design what that future could be, and then you deliver it, right? And together, the team, you appreciate the strengths, and so you could appreciate the strengths of your wife or your husband as opposed to being into contempt. The third behavior is defensiveness. How many of us have friends, brothers, sisters, husband, boyfriend, lovers, colleagues, leaders that defend themselves? Like, what are you saying? No, I don't get it. Well, no, you don't want that. You would see people victimizing themselves. Well, the response to this is, if you are the one defensive, and if you have that level of awareness, by the way, because it's not easy to know that you are defensive, or it takes to have an executive coach to help you unpack and see that, well, you can take responsibility. You can actually accept your responsibility, but also the partner's responsibility. You could also offer an apology, right? And the last one is stonewalling. I don't care. You're literally stonewalling. There are people who are expert at this.
For those
They've got
of you
a
listening,
PhD in
stonewalling
stonewalling.
is literally what it sounds like.
You are like this bloody stone. You're like a stone wall of stone, and you withdraw from. Okay, I see that it's heating now. Goodbye, I'm off. Hang on, we haven't finished the meeting, and you just disappears. And so what you
Stonewalling
could
can
do
also be
is
very psychological level, like, just literally letting everything slide, low investment, like mental investment. Yeah.
This is a beautiful
And that
segue
is
to
something
the
team coaching can work on. And, it might
Yes.
go into individual coaching, but it's definitely something that it spreads like wildfire. One team member or one leader stonewalls, and like it suddenly becomes a mirroring effect. And that is certainly a common thing seen within I don't want to say low performing, but teams that are facing challenges within.
Absolutely. At a team level, that is one thing, unpacking and revealing to the group, to the system, what is happening, and being able, through a facilitator, a system coach or a team coach, to transit through the coach and explore that. And the one thing at the individual level is you could soothe them. You could have a self-soothing, psychological self-soothing. You could, I use this technique of SBA. You stop, you breathe, you act. You stop what you were about to do, you were about to shout, you take a deep breath, then you act, or you go back to what you were about to do. You were about to shout at someone. It's
a very adult self-soothing mechanism, and the thing is, most of us don't have adult soothing mechanisms. We have to learn them as adults.
So that would be it. And I think team coaching, this is a great example where team system coaching can really address that. I call that the dirty fish that is under the table. Fish is great, it's fresh. After an hour, after 6 hours, after a day, it starts stinking. It starts becoming stinky.
It's not so cute anymore.
No, it's not that cute anymore. Nobody put the fish on the table. You want the fish, that stinky thing, to be on the table. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what doesn't work in a team. Let's as a team work on that. And if you look at the 4 behavior, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, then you have those antidotes. And that's a great example of why I love working with teams and building positive relationship and trust increase, because ultimately it builds the business up as well, and it helps leaders lead the team in a better way as well. I love it.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hire Dr. Soko, Dr. Passion, to get that stinky fish on the table.
Oh my gosh. Let's fry the fish. Let's fry it.
Let's fry it together. And maybe not eat it at the end. But anyways, this has been such a fantastic P-Talk, and honestly, so many great golden nuggets about the importance of relationships and all the different things that go into it. They're not that straightforward. They're not that simple, both in the personal world and in the professional world. So lovely to have you for our P-Talk today. Can't wait for the next one. See everybody next time.
Thanks so much, Mary Elizabeth.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.